Hi guys, it's Mr. Jackson with Blanket here, and Blanket dressed up specially to celebrate today. He's a unicorn today, um, because we are going to read chapter 30 of Everlost by Neal Shusterman with permission of Simon and Schuster. And the special thing about chapter 30 is that it is the final chapter. So we're going to finish the book today. Don't worry, there's another book after this. So, chapter 30. Leaving Everlost. Although Allie had no way of knowing it while she was encased in the jogger girl's body, Mikey McGill had never let her out of his sight. After what she had done to him, he wasn't letting her go. And even though she was hiding inside a living girl, eventually she would have to come out, and he'd have her. Vengeance drove him at first, but after a few hours, the feeling began to fade. The truth was, he admired Allie. She had been a worthy opponent. She had successfully outsmarted him, playing him for a fool. And he was a fool, wasn't he? How could he despise her for being more clever than him? Although Mikey had no skill at skinjacking, he did have another useful skill. He could rise from the depths. It was a skill he had never seen in anyone else. He only hoped it was powerful enough to do the job this time. Shiloh, the famous diving horse, had no problem leaping into the bay and following Allie as she fell. After all, the diving from a frighteningly high place was exactly what it was trained to do. Like Allie, the horse and its rider passed through the air, through the water, and found themselves plunging through the darkness of Everlost. The horse, not expecting this, began a panicking gallop through the stone. Locking his legs around the horse, Mikey spread his arms out wide, fishing with his fingertips for any sign of Allie, until he finally found her, grabbed her, and pulled her onto the horse with him. Then he dug his heels in, and the horse worked harder against the stone. Mikey tried to imagine them all fixed with hydrogen, like the airship, filled with hydrogen, like the airship, lighter than air, and most definitely lighter than stone. His powerful will battled the will of gravity, and soon they stopped sinking and began to rise. The forward momentum of the ghost horse trying to gallop through the stone was greater than their upward momentum, but that was fine. Even if they were only moving up inch by inch, they'd get to the surface eventually. At last, they surfaced in a New Jersey wood. It was dusk now, and they were a few miles inland from where they had begun. The second they were on the surface, Allie leapt off the horse, fully prepared to run if she had to. As far as she was concerned, Mikey McGill was not to be trusted, even if he did rescue her. "I should have let you sink," Mikey said. "Why didn't you?" Mikey didn't answer. Instead, he said, "Where were you trying to go? Maybe I can help you get there." She hesitated, expecting to see some sort of deceit in him, but found none. "If you must know, I'm going home." Mikey nodded. And then? Allie opened her mouth to answer and found that nothing came out. Allie was a goal-oriented girl. The problem was she rarely thought beyond the goal. What was her plan really? She would get home, but then what? She would see if her father survived the car accident. She would spend a little time watching her family's comings and goings. She would try to communicate with them. Maybe she would even find a neighbor willing to be skinjacked and then talk to her family, convincing them it was her by telling them things that only she could know. Allie would tell them she was all right, not to worry and not to mourn. But then what? It was now that Allie figured out something she should have figured out a long time ago. Home was no longer home. She had denied it, refused to think about it, pretended it didn't matter, but she couldn't pretend anymore. If her great victory was going home, then her victory was an empty one. I asked you a question, said Mikey. What will you do after you go home? Since Allie had no answer, she threw it back in his face. That's my business, she said. What about you? Are you going to make yourself into the one true monster of Everlost again? Mikey gently kicked his heels into Shiloh's side to remind the horse to keep pulling his hooves out of the ground so they didn't sink again. I'm done with being a monster, he said. Then he reached into his pocket and threw something to Allie, and she caught it. It was a coin. What's this for? You can use it to get where you're going. Allie looked at the coin. So similar to the one she had tossed into Mary's fountain. Did he mean what she thought he meant? To get where she was going? It was terrifying, yet exciting. It was terrifying, yet enticing. Electrifying. She stared at the coin, then looked back up at Mikey. Is that what you're doing then? Getting where you're going? Allie thought she read some fear in his face at the suggestion. No, he said. I don't think I'm going anywhere good. I'm in no hurry to get there. Well, said Allie, you can probably change where you're going, don't you think? Mikey didn't seem too convinced. I was a pretty nasty monster, he said. Were, reminded Allie. That was then. This is now. Mikey seemed to appreciate her practical, logical view of things. So then, how long do you think it would take to make up for being a monster? Allie thought about the question. I have no idea, but some people believe that all it takes is a sincere decision to change and you're saved. Maybe, said Mikey, but I'd rather play it safe. I was a monster for 30 years, so I'd say I need 30 years of good deeds to wipe the slate clean. Allie smirked. Is Mikey McGill even capable of good deeds? Mikey frowned. Okay then, 60 years of half-decent deeds. Fair enough, said Allie. She looked at the coin in her hand. It was lukewarm. She suspected if she held it long enough, it would get her where she was going. But just because she was ready to go, it didn't mean she had to just yet. It was a matter of choice. What was it her fortune had said? Linger or light? The choice is yours. Allie chose to put the coin in her hip pocket for now. She always had been good at saving her money. Mikey held out his hand to her, ready to lift her up on the horse. Home, he asked. But suddenly it didn't seem all that urgent. There were still plenty of unknowns to explore here in Everlost. She could squeeze a lot of them in between here and home. There's no hurry, she told him. But Mikey wasn't pleased. Taking you home, he said, was going to be my first halfway decent deed. I'm sure you'll find another one. Mikey sighed in frustration. This is not going to be easy. I'm good at being bad, but I'm bad at being good. I don't know the first thing about good deeds. Well, Allie said with a grin, I do know a 12-step program. Then she grabbed Mikey's hand, climbed on the horse with him, and they rode off together toward all things unknown. Nick had to win this race, even if the odds were against him. And so, when the ghost train dropped him off at the old Penn station, he wasted no time. It was dusk now. The train had been fast, but an airship didn't have to worry about tracks. His only hope was that Mary's learning curve when it came to flying the thing had slowed her down. When she had first taken to the air, the airship was erratic, turning this way and that, unable to set a course. With any luck, she was still zigzagging across New Jersey, trying to get the hang of it. He ran at full speed from the station all the way down to the plaza at the base of the towers. The same kids were there playing kickball, jumping rope, and playing tag. Is Mary here? He called out. He expected them to rush to him and capture him. What was Mary's version of chiming? Nick had a suspicion that he was about to find out. But they didn't rush him. Instead, one of the kickball kids playing the outfield turned to him and said, Meadow says she went away for a while, but she'll be back real soon. Good, thought Nick. He had beaten her here, and now, when he looked west, he could see that he hadn't beaten her by much. Between the buildings to the west, Nick could see the Zeppelin in the sky across the Hudson River, still high, but dropping toward them. It couldn't be any more than 5 miles away. Nick knew he didn't have much time. Go get Meadow, he told the kickball kid. Tell her to gather everyone at the fountain. Then the kickball kid ran off, confounding the daily pattern of his game. Nick went over to the fountain himself and stood on its lip, calling out to all the kids in the plaza. Everyone, listen to me. I have a message from Mary. That got their attention. Jump ropes stopped spinning. Balls stopped bouncing. Kids began to converge on the fountain. Nick looked to the west again. The airship was there, halfway across the river. It was still too high, but that didn't matter. As soon as the kids saw it, the game would be over. He would lose their attention. He had to keep everyone focused on him. Meadow began to arrive with kids from the higher floors. Mary wants me to tell you that you no longer have to fear the McGill. She's cut him down to size. A cheer from the kids, and I have something very exciting to tell you. Okay, thought Nick, here it goes. How many of you threw your wishes in the fountain? Every hand went up. And how many of your wishes came true? One by one, the hands went down until not a single one of them was left. Well, said Nick, it's time for all your wishes to come true. And with that, he jumped into the fountain, reached into the water, and started pulling up coins. Come on, he said, everyone gets their coin back. At first, they were reluctant, until the first girl came forward, all pigtails and big eyes. She stepped into the fountain, and Nick took the coin, pressing it to her palm. The entire crowd watched and saw with their own eyes what happened next. The girl got where she was going. There was a long moment of silence as it hit home for these kids exactly what this meant for each of them. And then they all began climbing into the fountain themselves, lining up and accepting the coins from Nick. In less than a minute, their excitement reached critical mass. All sense of order broke down, and it became a wild rush of kids, leaping, splashing, grabbing coins, and disappearing in rainbow sprays of light. Nick left the fountain and stood back to watch. To the west, the Zeppelin was growing larger as it neared, eclipsing the setting sun. But if the kids crowding the fountain noticed, they didn't care. By the time Mary arrived, she would be too late. They'd be gone. Perhaps not every single one of them, but most of them. All the ones who were ready, as it should be. Nick looked up to the peaks of the Twin Towers, converging the way tourists had during the tower's 29 years of life. It was a comfort to know that they would never be gone completely because they were here, a timeless part of Everlost. They were great monuments of memory. And although Mary had, for a time, turned them into her own personal orphanage, that was over now. They had a greater place in the scheme of things. By now, more than half the children were gone, and the rest were well on their way. Meadow came up to Nick, and together they watched the joyful vanishings. Mary's gonna have a fit when she sees this, Meadow said. It'll totally trip her out. Then she smiled. Good thing I won't be here to see it. Then Meadow ran towards the fountain, jumped in, and a moment later she was gone. Nick pulled his own coin from his pocket, the one he had salvaged from the empty bucket. It was still cold as cold. It was still cold as cold could be. But that was all right. He realized now that while his arrival had tied him to Allie, his departure was tied to Mary. As long as she was fighting to keep children here, he would be fighting to free them. He supposed that made them enemies. It almost made him laugh. How strange it was to be in love with your enemy. With the Zeppelin coming in for a landing, and the last of the children vanishing from the fountain, Nick put his hands in his pocket and left, strolling leisurely uptown. Perhaps Mary was right about Everlost being an eternal world, a place where all things and places that have earned immortality remain forever in glory. If that were the case, then Everlost was like the grand museum of the universe, a heavenly and priceless gallery. As Mary once said, they were blessed to be able to see it. But a museum was to be visited and appreciated, not to be lived in. That was Mary's mistake. Afterlights were merely visitors passing through. Nick knew there were more lost souls in lost places to free. There were more fountains and more buckets of coins to be found. And although he didn't know when he would ever get where he was going, he knew that when the time was right, he would get there. In the meantime, he had work to do. Epilogue: The Sky Witch. The little girl sat knees to chest on the playground sand, not knowing what to do. The last she remembered, she was at the very tippy top of a jungle gym, above all the other kids. Then she had lost her balance and fallen. For the strangest moment, she had found herself running down a tunnel toward a distant light. If only she had listened to her mother and tied her shoelaces, she might not have tripped over her own feet on the way. And now she was here, still in the park, sitting on a small patch of sand beneath the jungle gym. Her parents were gone, and she instinctively knew they weren't coming back. But she didn't know how she knew it. When she had fallen, the park had been full of children, and the day had been hot. Now it was empty and cold. Even the trees, which had been lush and green, were now yellowing and losing their leaves. And the worst thing about it was she couldn't move because the rest of the playground had turned to quicksand. There was a sound far off in the sky, but getting closer. A mechanical groan that didn't quite sound like a plane or a helicopter. And when she turned toward the sound, she saw something amazing. A big silver thing came over the trees and lowered into the empty soccer field. It was like a blimp she had been seen hovering above baseball games, but much, much bigger. Still, she held her knees to her chest, excited, terrified as the giant blimp thing dropped down, hovering just a few feet above the soccer field. Then some sort of hatch opened, a ramp came down, and a creature, all slender and green, came out. No, not a creature at all. This was an angel. An angel in a green dress. She was coming right toward the girl, and the closer she got, the more the girl's fear melted away. Finally, the angel reached the playground and looked at the girl through the wide, cage-like bars of the jungle gym. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, the angel said. Everything's going to be all right. I promise. The girl looked toward the blimp thing, and the angel smiled. Would you like a ride on my airship? The girl nodded. Then the angel said, it only costs a nickel. The girl looked down sadly. I don't have any money. But the angel only smiled. I'll bet you do. Why don't you check? The little girl reached into her pockets, and to her surprise, she found a nickel in there. Or at least she thought it was a nickel. It was too worn to tell. She held it out to the green angel, but then hesitated. After all, this nickel was all she had. Something told her she might not want to part with it so easily. The angel's smile faded, but only slightly. I'm sure you don't want to stay here alone, she said. If you do, the chocolate ogre might find you. The chocolate ogre? A monster, said the angel. He lures you with the smell of chocolate, and then he captures you and sends you away. Where? The angel shook her head. That's the scary part. No one knows. For a moment, the girl thought she saw a wave of sorrow wash across the angel's face, but it passed. Now, wouldn't you rather come with me? And so the girl gave her coin to the angel gently took her hand. Now, let's find out what you like to do, and let you do it. The girl rose, and holding the angel's hand, she walked right through the bars of the jungle gym, like magic. Welcome to Everlost, the angel said as they crossed the field toward the silver blimp thing. My name is Mary. Are there other kids like me in your balloon? The girl asked. Just a couple, said Mary, but there are lots more out there, and we'll find them all, won't we? The girl nodded. Yes, before the chocolate ogre does. Together, they climbed into the silver airship and rose into the Everlost sky. And that's the end. So guys, that was chapter 30, and that was the end of the book. We did it. We finished. I hope you guys are proud of yourselves for reading this with me, and I'm proud of you, and I had a lot of fun. So I want to ask a couple questions about, not only this chapter, this conclusion to the book. So first is about Mikey, or the McGill. So Mikey spent 30 years being a really, really bad guy, like such a bad guy that he was actually a monster. When he was the McGill, he spent 30 years as a bad guy, the McGill. Now that he's Mikey again, he decides he does not want to be the McGill again. He does not want to be a bad guy again. He wants to be a good guy. So he decides that if he spends 60 years, which is twice the amount of time that he spent as a bad guy, as a sort of good guy, that doing good things, because remember, he did a lot of bad things when he was the McGill. So if he spends 60 years doing good things, he thinks that, he hopes that that will make up for, or start to make up for, the bad things he did. So my question is, do you think he's going to be able to do that? Do you think it's possible for him to spend 60 years doing good things, just like all of a sudden become a good guy when he's so used to being a bad guy? And like my follow-up to that, have you ever had a time that you wanted to change something about your behavior? Like, like maybe there's somebody you realize you weren't treating as kindly as you could be, or you realize you want to be a more supportive friend, or you realize you wanted to handle your anger differently, whatever it was. Have you ever had something you wanted to change about yourself that you then worked hard to change? And what did that feel like? So then my next question is about Mary. We don't get to see what happens when she comes back to the Twin Towers, but we presume, because of what it said in the book, that she's going to come back to the Twin Towers and find out that all of her children are gone. Because Nick set them free, remember, with the coins. How do you think Mary feels when she finds all of her kids are gone? And then last question is, so we just learned about a new monster, the chocolate ogre. Who do you think is the chocolate ogre? And what do you think his or her deal is? Think about some clues from things we learned in this book to think about, like, to help you figure out who the chocolate ogre might be. But yeah, like, what do you think the chocolate ogre is going to be? This new monster. So then, yeah, I guess that's it. Tomorrow, I will be back. We will be starting the next book in the series, Everwild. So we don't have that long to go to start hopefully figuring out who the chocolate ogre is. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I had a lot of fun with this first book. And I'm going to have fun with the next one. I hope you guys enjoy it. Miss you. Stay safe. And be proud of yourself for reading the whole book with me. Bye.